Welcome to Lady of Record, the podcast. I'm Georgie Paul, founder of Lady of Record. Join me as I interview incredible women who are boldly owning their financial security and impacting communities through real estate. I hope you enjoy. Today's guest is Sara Myerson. Sara is the managing director of investments at MSquared, a New York based, women owned real estate impact platform focused on creating mixed income, mixed use projects that promote affordability, sustainability, and diversity. Sara oversees the sourcing and execution of investments and brings over 15 years of development, design, finance, and public private partnership experience, all with a focus on emerging and transforming urban markets. She began her career at Goldman Sachs, working in the Urban Investment Group and Investment Banking Division, and has since held a wide range of roles, including Director of Planning for the Boston Planning and Development Agency, where she oversaw Boston's land use planning, zoning, and urban design, leading its first citywide planning initiative in 50 years, Imagine Boston 2030, as well as Vice President at Suffolk Capital, Executive Director of the Office of Olympic Planning, and Chief of Staff and Director of Policy at Preservation of Affordable Housing. She holds a Master in Urban Planning from Harvard University and a BA from Middlebury College, and sits on the Urban Land Institute's Boston Advisory Board and Public-Private Partnership Council. Sara is bravely and creatively redefining and setting a new bar for real estate investors and developers to align economic opportunity with social impact, and I'm honored to speak with her today. Sara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to join you today.
I like to begin each conversation with the question, what about real estate creates a spark within you?
So it's such a great question. And I've thought a lot about it in preparation for this podcast. For me, real estate is the essence of place, and all of our lives happen in places. That's where we create memories. It's where we create opportunities for ourselves and for others. It's where we build community. It's how we interact as humanity. And so I think for me, being involved in an industry that helps to create those spaces where we experience life is just a really exciting prospect. From early on, I always loved the built environment. And before I even know what that term really meant, but like to architecture and buildings and experiencing cities. I think that is a spark early on, continued to influence me and come back around to how I think about, what is the legacy I hope to leave with my career, and how do I, hope to leave a little bit of me in the places that we build and build community.
I couldn't agree more. And with that in mind, I want to dive right into your approach at MSquared because it truly stands out as different in the space. And I really want to jump into something that I think is top of mind for so many people right now, which is affordability. Given that more than half of American households are rent burdened. How do you define a mixed income, mixed use project, and why do you see it as a formula for addressing affordability while at the same time driving positive impact for both investors and communities?
I think that the housing crisis we're facing right now is one of the most pressing crises of our time. If people don't have a feeling of stable shelter at its most basic level, it really prevents you from having opportunities, stability in your life, and really taking care of those that you love and you're hoping to create stability for. At MSquared, we are a woman-owned, impact-oriented real estate platform, and what we are focused on is exactly what you were saying. So mixed income, mixed-use communities. We are particularly focused on housing creation, so building and developing new housing, all with a focus on rental housing stock. We do acquire as well, and do acquisitions, and I can touch on that kind of later on. But the essence of who we are is really focused on new housing creation and mixed income asset class. We really think bringing things mixed income. So for us, what that means, it means that there are um, apartments within our buildings that are affordable or attainable to households at a range of different incomes. What that means can vary depending on the specific project and the strategies that we use to get it financed. But to make it most simply, we strive to have a certain percentage of the building, ranging from kind of 20 to 50% of the building set at rent levels that are attainable for workforce jobs. So we're thinking essential employees, essential workers, the teachers, the EMTs, police officers, those in the service industry that help make our communities whole. We really want to make sure that those who are involved in those essential jobs for communities can live in the places where they work. And then the other portion of our buildings are market rate or unrestricted housing. And the thought there is really we hope that our buildings themselves are representative of the cities in which they're located or the urban areas in which they're located. And you have this kind of mini community that reflects the diversity of incomes and jobs in an urban area at the building level, and then can create a better and more sustainable ecosystem in the urban area as well. I think the essence of it came from the idea that essential workers shouldn't have to travel in to where their jobs are. They should be able to live in close proximity to their jobs. And so we are trying to make sure that we're creating housing that's affordable for the full spectrum of people who are kind of in close proximity and employed within that, call it 15-minute community. Um, we think that that's at its core is what we need for that social sustainability as a society.
Sometimes there's not necessarily the understanding between the two of how you can also do good, but also create business and economic opportunity in the process. And I
Yeah,
think you are
absolutely.
really different in that way.
And many of us at MSquared kind of have our roots in the early days of impact-oriented investing. So thinking about investing with a value mandate as well, or multiple bottom lines as it kind of evolved into the way people would discuss this concept of doing well financially, while also doing well based upon a set of values that you're trying to operate in your investment decisions. I think money talks. And so what we have focused on is we've raised third-party capital at MSquared. We are an investment manager, and invest and deploy through traditional structures of real estate private equity funds into projects. And we are investing for both a financial return as well as a overall objective of creating that mixed income housing. Many people think about kind of these two bifurcated worlds, right? This affordable housing that has to have full um, subsidization, whether that be from the federal government or local government, but is really a subsidized asset class. And then market rate, which has private capital flowing into it and generates financial returns for those investors. We really seek to blend the two. And so in our projects, we have those units that are set at certain rents and that are more affordable. Often that unlocks different advantageous financing mechanisms for us. That could be subsidies in terms of grants. It could be tax credits that we unlock or have available to us to help finance those projects. Also can be things that enhance our operations. So many of our projects benefit from real estate property tax abatements in exchange for having that affordability. We then have the market rate side, and that really is able to generate more of a financial return. To a certain extent, it may cross subsidize some of that affordability, But we as a whole are still looking to generate strong risk-adjusted financial returns for our investors. So we are very much, first and foremost, kind of financially driven and are looking at those investment metrics of, what are our yield on cost? What do we think the internal rate of return will be on this investment, or the equity multiple, so that we are delivering strong financial returns for our investors and showing them that private capital doesn't have to be public subsidy, but that private capital can be part of the solution for the housing crisis. Um, Talk a lot about risk-adjusted returns. I think that that's something that's so key to understanding how the mixed income asset class works. So if you're developing and then leasing up a luxury multifamily building, you're taking a ton of risk on it being that you're going to be able to achieve rents that have never been achieved in a market before, and you're going to be able to find people who are setting a new threshold for what they'll pay to rent in your building. For us, we know for those affordable units, there are so many people eager to be in those units and who are going to rent those up very quickly. The risk of getting heads on beds, like into those units, is very, very low. And so, from a risk adjusted standpoint, we know we're going to absorb those units. We know that you're going to have those units be stickier. People aren't going to vacate as much. You're not going to have as much of those friction costs of having to release apartments. And that really helps bring down the risk profile of these projects. And I think also it shows investors that there's an opportunity to create housing that's a little bit less risky. Perhaps that means its returns are a little bit lower than what you might strive for if you were doing 100% market rate, but it's also more predictable, and a steadier stream of returns.
I think it goes to show that you can diversify even within one project itself and create that security for yourself. Hearing you explain this brings up another point, which is that research shows that women and minority fund managers are more likely to direct capital toward women and minorities, creating a multiplier effect. And again, to me, MSquared is really the ultimate example of this. Your website shares that only 2 of the top 25 development firms in the country are run by a woman, none by a person of color, and less than 5% of real estate investment firms are led by women and people of color. Given that you are one of the few breaking this mold, can you share how you are targeting and deepening the impact of your capital when it comes to the people aspect of your business?
We think that those who are building the places that we live our lives should be reflective of how diverse our communities are. And I think we are, as I mentioned, we are a WBE, a women-owned business that's operating as both a investment manager as well as a developer. So we really stand out in the industry. Even the composition of our firm is extremely unique. I think there's 15 of us now, and 14 are women. So it is a very female-heavy presence. And I think that some of that is, we do approach the work we do a little bit differently. And I think, we having all spent a significant amount of time in finance, real estate finance, and the public sector, have seen how difficult it can be for women and minorities to develop projects or invest. But I'll really speak about kind of the development side and where we're trying to direct capital. One of the things it's who's sitting at the table. It's who people's networks are. I guess subtle things about business where people gravitate to their networks, and their networks may look more like them than not. Really can be a hindrance, especially for developers who are looking for capital, for early stage capital, or to gain traction with their own track record as they move on from larger firms. So I think one thing that we're doing very proactively is thinking about the networks that we operate in, and making sure that we are encouraging those in those networks to explore opportunities to grow their pipeline, grow their businesses. We also think it's incredibly important to give credit to emerging developers for the track record that they've developed at larger firms. We look at our partners when we're looking for partners to invest with, and look at the experience they have from their previous firms as really a testament to the work that they're going to be able to do on their own. And I think that that is uh, perhaps just a little bit of a subtle difference early on in our process that enables some of those developers to get more of a foot in the door and have longer conversations with us. I think we also really kind of span two worlds where many of us came from institutional finance backgrounds. We Many of our investors are institutional investors, and so we seek very often to find really strong partners to partner with who haven't tapped into the institutional capital world yet, but we think are ready to, and we help to create that bridge for them. So I think often about a partner that we have based in the Seattle metro area. The company is called Coase, and the woman who runs Coase has a amazing track record with her team. And so Kathy has an incredibly strong track record with her team in the Pacific Northwest, has developed a number of really wonderful properties that are all targeting that essential workforce that I spoke to earlier. But to date, she's really relied on, the friends and family country club style fundraising that we're used to in kind of smaller scale real estate. We think she was really ready for that to break into the institutional world. And we've partnered with her to date on 2 deals, about to do our 3rd with her, and have had the opportunity to introduce her to other partners of ours who have become lenders for her, and have really helped her to continue to see the prospect of growing her business. And so I think that some of it is really just developing those strong relationships and nurturing them over time as we work together and see what the potential is for her to grow her business and us to also continue to grow with her and invest in multiple projects with her. So it's incredibly important for us to really build those relationships and continue to find ways to help those companies grow as we are ourselves at MSquared are growing. And I think I come back around to intentionality. We're intentional in how we're trying to do it, and sometimes it just takes that little bit of a step to be intentional about those decisions to make a difference.
The intentionality. I couldn't agree more with that, Sarah, and I'm so inspired hearing you share this information because that's really essentially how Lady of Record came to be as well, is coming from more of an institutional global firm type of background, but being intentional and being able to apply that access, that education, that pipeline to people that are historically unrepresented in the space, and understanding that in order for them to get started and in order for us to start changing what looks normal in the industry, you do have to take a chance on someone, and being able to feel like they have you as a partner and have that relationship. I think it's creating this whole new ecosystem, whole new network, and being in the weeds with them on the deals, which I think is also where rubber meets the road. Is, the education and the access is one part, absolutely, but it really comes down to who's in the deal with you, who's getting it done, because that's where I think the change really happens.
I think just on that point, and a lot of what you guys are doing with Lady of Record, I think so often women are fearful of taking that step in the real estate space because maybe they haven't done it before, they haven't seen mentors do it before, or they're fearful of what they don't know. And so often we see our male counterparts, they behave differently in some of these spaces where they're more willing to kind of fake it till you make it, for lack of a better word, which is sometimes what you have to do to get that initial experience. And rather than apologizing for a track record you don't have, or apologizing for experience that you don't have, one thing I really encourage women to do in this space is to surround themselves with a network that has that experience. And so you might not have it, but you know someone who does. And that's going to help you when you need to answer that question, or when you have that challenge on a project, or when you need just a little bit more of the conviction to make that step forward in an investment decision. And I do really think that women can support other women in doing this. And I think that's so crucial to us, continuing to be more successful in the real estate space. We lag behind other pieces of the financial sector in terms of that gender parity within those senior roles. And I think networks can be a huge part of helping us continue to push that forward.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Sarah, and building on your ability to create change at a systemic level in that way. How do you personally own your authenticity as an investor, as a developer, when you are the only woman in the room or you are going up against a pretty tough situation? How do you tune into that?
It's always challenging if you're, kind of feel that you stand out for some reason as the only woman in the room. I'd be lying to say that that's not something that, continues to be a challenge at times. But I think that one thing I try to really own, is, confidence and conviction in the work that I've done to date, and in the, work that I've seen my peers do, who I've continued to grow within this industry, and I have a strong network of women in various roles at other firms that I know I can pick up a call and ask them about their experience on a certain negotiation or their experience on a certain type of project, and I really hold those relationships incredibly dear because they are, I think, crucial as we try to continue to make a name for ourselves. It also helps, frankly. A place like MSquared is unique in that we have kind of a firm of women supporting other women, which is really wonderful. I think that a key thing we talk about a lot at MSquared is the value that comes from how we approach a project differently and the value that we can create in doing that. And sometimes it's subtle things. When we look at a floor plan for a unit, we might see something in the practicality of how a layout is done or the need for there to be additional storage for it to operate in tighter square footage that really adds value, helps these units lease up. And it's just us bringing a different eye or a different lived experience to the work that we're doing. So much of what we see in real estate and how we're shaping real estate comes from our lived experiences because it's about the places that we live and operate day to day. And I think knowing that it's okay and perhaps even better to have a fresh perspective on certain ways to create those spaces can be really valuable. And I think that that holds whether you're doing a large 250 unit multifamily building or a small income, your first income property. But you're seeing something about how you would maximize value in a certain space or how you would differentiate a space that others may really benefit from and appreciate. A tiny example of that, we have a project in Dallas, that we developed with a female-led developer down there, and one thing that was really important for her was thinking about the secure access from the parking garage to the corridors, for each building, and she really wanted to make sure that if you were parking your car at night, you could get into your corridor without having to go through a dark hallway or an elevator bank, because for her, that would make a huge difference on feeling safe coming home at night by yourself, particularly a woman who may live by herself coming home to her apartment. And so we developed that parking garage to have direct access at each level of the building, through a lit corridor, so that it wasn't going into an empty or hidden corridor in the parking garage. And it's something that makes a difference for our residents that they notice there, and they feel that there is a security in how they're accessing their home, that is appealing to them. And so I think those small things that you see in real estate can really benefit from having a different perspective. And so rather than shying away from it, own that. Believe in that authenticity and how that's going to create value for a project.
It's interesting you bring up conviction. That's something that's come up on this podcast before. And it really is, I think, leaning into that conviction and trusting yourself in that way and really fighting for that. And I think the example of your Dallas project is perfect. Just having someone who is thinking differently and how that can completely change the smallest detail of a physical space, but is huge in someone's personal life and how the two translate from one to another. And in leading with that and hearing you talk about Dallas, I do really want to dive into a couple of your projects, which I'm so excited to hear the details on. The first is Miramar, where you transformed a full city block in Upper Manhattan's Inwood neighborhood. Can you share what you've built there and what it was like to source and execute an opportunity of that magnitude, and maybe walk us through a little bit of the strategy and also the numbers behind the deal?
So the Miramar project is a nearly 700 unit project in Upper Manhattan, as you mentioned. It's in the Inwood neighborhood in Upper Manhattan, and it was actually boldly one of the first projects that MSquared took on after we were founded in 2020. Um, MSquared partnered with two other developers on the project, and we are both a developer and an investor in the project. We partnered with L&M and Taconic, who are two known names in the multifamily mixed income multifamily development space, particularly in Manhattan. And in partnering that with them, I think what that enabled us to do early on in our life as a company was to really highlight and leverage our strengths internally, and then surround ourselves with other firms that had strengths within the real estate space. And so we, as a smaller company at the time we did this at MSquared, did not have in-house construction expertise, had been around a number of development projects before. But the L&M team is vertically integrated and did perform the construction. So we had that component of the team that was rounded out there. At MSquared, we really focused on the sourcing and execution of the financing strategy, which was really leveraging a lot of our expertise. And then Taconic, who actually was involved early on in the project, and as the Inwood neighborhood was rezoned and involved in the project, are really leveraging their multifamily experience and will be property managing the project as well. So you really have all of those different elements coming together and really creating a really strong team to execute on such a large project. And the project itself, we're very, very proud of what's been delivered in the neighborhood. It's a really dynamic project from both the size of it, but also the programming of it. So one unique element of it is a mixed use component, which is a partnership with the nonprofit People's Theater to operate a nonprofit theater in the ground floor space of the building. And so you have a kind of a cultural anchor to the building. There will be neighborhood serving retail adjacent to that. And then on top of that, you have a mixed income profile of the multifamily spaces within the building, all within a beautiful Class A, highly amenitized building. The project is beginning to deliver now. So we are starting lease up this summer and are really incredibly excited about how that's progressing. It's phased, but construction will be completed on the building by the end of the year. And it's really a unique mixing of incomes. So we have a really broad range. We have 40% of the building that's affordable, between 40 to 80% of AMI. It's pretty deeply affordable in New York City. And then we have a middle income component that's at 120% of AMI. So those are people who are making six figures, but where it's still housing is increasingly unattainable in the New York City market. And then you have the market rate component as well. And so to have that mixing of incomes, that really kind of dynamic intentionality within kind of how we're thinking about creating a mixed income community. And I can say community because I do really think with 700 units, you're really thinking about a little microcosm of an urban neighborhood right there, all in close proximity to the subway, 30 minutes to get to Midtown, unmatched in terms of its kind of proximity to really exciting things. You have public parks over along the river. You really have this really dynamic area and community. And so we have been incredibly excited from the very beginning to be involved in this type of a project in the Inwood neighborhood, and to be able to showcase what we really believe is, a true MSquared project where you have a mix of uses, you have a mixing of incomes, and it's all really located within an area of high opportunity.
Hearing you say this, Sarah, is incredible because you're helping even me realize what we're doing here with Lady of Record even is kind of making our own mixed use, mixed income ecosystem, like you're saying, where we help first time home buyers, we help seasoned investors, we help retail with purpose get into that community as well. And like you're saying, when all of that blends together into a community, the impact that comes along from that is so beneficial and transformative. And One thing I'm curious about too, as far as the sourcing goes, because 700 units is obviously a very large scale project. Did you have to assemble different parcels? Was it tough getting the ground for this? How did that process work?
It is on a couple of different parcels. There's some long-term ground leases that were negotiated. It definitely was an assemblage that was challenging over time, and adds complexity. On top of that, it's not a simple debt and equity financing structure. We have a lot of different sources in this project. So we have low income housing tax credits that we syndicated and brought that equity into the project. There's brownfield tax credits that were syndicated and brought into this project as a source. Then there's more traditional, just equity. There's some grant financing that helped to pay for more of that community's cultural space on the ground floor. And it also happens to be located in an opportunity zone, which was incredibly important for our equity investor on the project. So it really was a number of different financial mechanisms that all had to come together to unlock the potential on the site. So once you went through the challenge of assembling the site in a newly rezoned neighborhood, we then had to go through the challenge of piecing together that financing. And I think, that it is illustrative of how challenging it can be to deliver these types of communities, but it's possible. And it really is possible if you can layer in all of those different financing sources together.
Yeah, the ability to pull those different levers and make it come together on one cohesive project is incredible, especially in a city like New York. You're clearly not stopping there. Jumping coast over here to Los Angeles, I want to talk about another one of your projects, the Clark on 54th in Crenshaw, again here in LA. And what's most inspiring to me about this opportunity is the way that you considered new creative types of ownership. So, not just the different financing, but also ownership itself, and structured the opportunity to enable greater wealth creation for everyone involved, including the original owners of the land that you are developing on. Can you explain how this project came to life, how you came up with this idea, how you executed it, and being that it is a very new model, what some of those challenges were and how you kind of worked through those to make this reality?
This really, I think, illustrates the spectrum of what we're really trying to do at MSquared. So you have a very large urban project with the Miramar in Inwood, and we're going completely switching scales, switching coasts, looking at a 48 unit project in Crenshaw in Los Angeles. But this project really, I think, is such a great illustrative example of how community led redevelopment and transformation can be done. And so in Crenshaw, you have the neighborhood really at a transition point and a cusp, as it has new transit running through the neighborhood. And so you have the K line connecting the neighborhood to LAX and to West LA. And we were approached by a development team that had come together, a woman developer who had built a career in multifamily and mixed use projects in Los Angeles, and a family that was a long term landowner. And was really looking to be part of the change in the neighborhood. And they, as a legacy to their family, they were looking for it to be part of a multifamily redevelopment of the land that they owned. So those two had come together and approached us with the project, looking for a way to unlock feasibility and get it financed and get it in the ground. And we worked with them for a number of months on a structure and connecting them to different financing sources and lenders to try to put this all together. Ultimately, we at MSquared invested in the project out of our fund that we manage, and so we are the LP equity investor in the project. The partnership is between the WBE female developer and the family is the day-to-day managing member general partner invested in the project. Um, and they contributed the land to the project, and that's really a huge component of the equity that they have contributed into the project. But on top of that, they have, they also have additional equity that they put in. And then we found an impact-oriented lender. Lisk is the lender on this project, and pulled together a number of other public, private, and philanthropic initiatives to round out the capital stack. I think the real difference here is the idea that the long-term landowner uh, would and it really took from their side, I think a lot of guts, and determination, but to be part of that project transforming the site as opposed to, um, letting others be part of it. And I think as they speak to it, it was so important for their family's legacy to create something in the Crenshaw neighborhood, and we were really excited to be part of that creation with them. The project it's also mixed income. It will be affordable. About 20% of the units will be affordable at 50% of AMI, so pretty deeply affordable, significantly below what the average income is in the neighborhood. And then the rest will be market rate. We'll have a small ground floor commercial space where we're looking at partnering with other local kind of homegrown initiatives. The Destination Crenshaw project, which is very focused on local serving retail, will likely be a partner as we look to activate that space.
I have been fortunate enough to see the Clark on 54th in person and rising from the ground, and I can't wait to see it come to fruition in the neighborhood. I think it's going to transform what's possible on a number of different levels, and not just here in Los Angeles, but I think what you're doing with MSquared and the way that you're building your networks and partnerships with others and really collaborating is changing what people see as possible with real estate. And I think, again, goes back to this to me is, again, the perfect example of endeavoring to close the various wealth gaps, which both MSquared and Lady of Record share it as part of their purpose. And I hope that this really inspires others to consider similar models and really do the work that it takes to get to these more creative structures rather than just settling for what's easy. And I think, like you said, the original landowners having the bravery to make that choice and be part of it in that way because it's also new from that end as well. So I think it takes everybody saying, "We wanna see something different, and we're committed to helping each other get there," and doing it with intentionality, going back to some of your earlier points.
I think one thing that's been so exciting about the Clark on 54th project is that so often people are fearful of change in neighborhoods, whether that be, they're fearful of the change or the gentrification of it not being an inclusive change for those who have long called the neighborhood home. And everything that we are looking to do with the Clark is actually um, really do something different, that really is for the community. And even in the type of units that the team wanted to build, they really wanted to build units where those who are being priced out of home ownership in the neighborhood, but wanted to come back to the neighborhood they grew up in, could have a great multifamily option there. And so really, I think that it was done in a way that was really um, by the community for the community as it's going through some of this transformation and change, as opposed to being, standing in opposition to change. It's really kind of doing it in a way that embraces it and shapes it. And I think that is, our neighborhood change can be incredibly challenging and can feel really disruptive. But I was really inspired by the team that they were coming at it from a different perspective, where they really wanted to view it as something that's hopeful. And even on the site itself, you mentioned you've seen it, but we have some pictures where there's kind of a graffiti sign in the back that says hope. And I think it's so reflective of what this redevelopment means to me, because it really is coming from a perspective of, let's be hopeful and believe in the possibility in real estate. And I think to me, that's really exciting. And to be doing it in a mixed income model like this shows that it can again be about doing something that's value aligned that also can be financially beneficial. And to think, I think so often we view these types of real estate in two barbells, right? Where it's either completely profit driven or it's philanthropic and CDFI and 100% affordable, all of those things. And I think there's a way to do both. And at at our core at MSquared and me and my career, like that's what it's about. If we're going to create great spaces, we have to do both. We have to have the value alignment, but we have to make sure private capital still wants to do it because private capital is part of what shapes our neighborhoods and our places.
What I think about too, hearing you say this, is, for example, having local retail be able to be part of a Class A building so that it fits the people living in the space, it fits the existing neighborhood, and it's not a repetition of other Class A projects around the city and other neighborhoods that just simply are not a fit for this one. And it really gives a chance for some of these more local operators to experience that level of quality and being able to grow their business with that level of quality, but doing it in a way that, again, is authentic to them and doesn't take away from that, but adds to it, enhances that, and really sets them up for that success and security in the process.
Yeah, and I think, as we look at those who are renting in urban areas, those who are looking at some of the buildings that we develop, they really appreciate the local serving retail. They feel like that's a key part of the creation of place that they want to be part of. And I think that um we've seen it is challenging to find retail tenants in certain places. Retail is a very challenging business, and it feels like it's more so challenging every year. It doesn't get easier. And not every building can be filled with, a huge range of retail spaces, but there can be combinations. There can be community space. There can be some retail space. There's a lot of ways to think about that programming coming together. And one thing we do is, we try when possible to focus less on maximizing the revenue of the retail space and more on underwriting revenue levels that we think are important for the overall building and the place that we're trying to create. So, really trying to match that up so that the placemaking is matched alongside what the type of tenant we want can afford to pay in those spaces.
I want to also talk about how you think about sustainability when you design these projects and when you underwrite and how that impacts your decisions. Going back to your website again, you highlight that buildings generate 40% of US carbon emissions and are responsible for almost 30% of energy consumption. How are you building with this in mind?
So I think the first thing that we focus on with all of our projects at MSquared is really location. And we think location is a key part of building sustainably. We need to be building in the right spaces to then be living more sustainable lives. And so we look almost exclusively at transit-oriented development locations, so areas that are in close proximity to public transportation options. Those may look different in different cities. So in New York City, you have the subway, you have bus, you have city bike, you have other things. But some of our projects, even in places where there's less public transportation, like suburban Seattle, are built right adjacent to a new light rail stop so that they can really take advantage of that light rail and go directly into the urban core. So I think the number one thing we look at is the location of our buildings and really thinking about that. That location also means that we want to be building in, and looking at the long-term climate threats and challenges to those places. So really thinking about flooding, thinking about the risk of other severe weather events and what that would mean for those who are living there, and making sure we're building appropriately in the event that there are those threats. We also strive to meet codes, especially in jurisdictions. Well, we always meet the code, but we really are looking at places where they're stretching what is required, and looking at building all electric wherever possible so that we can attach into a cleaner grid as we have overall change in how we are consuming energy in this country. And some of the other things we do may be more minor. So some of those other things that we do are more focused on, can we think about a green roof? Can we add solar? How do we future proof our project to make sure that it has the right capacity for more EV charging in the future? Perhaps the demand for that's low today, but it might be much higher 5 years from now. So how do we make sure we're future proofing and creating the opportunity for that? So I think, not to overuse the word in this, but again, intentionality in some of those decisions, and that intentionality being not just uh, materials that we're using for building or the type of building that we're building, but also where we're building it.
I really appreciate you sharing that spectrum because I think so often people probably think that in order to incorporate sustainability into their designs or real estate decisions, that it is more technical and expensive as opposed to something as simple as thinking about location and what that can mean. So I really appreciate that you brought those two elements. And one thing that I'd like to also kind of shift gears into that we've already touched on a little bit today is taking again more of that institutional level experience and bringing down the basics to individuals because I think the same can be applied no matter the type of deal, the city, the size of the opportunity. But what I'd really be curious to get your take on as well is given your focus on major urban markets, what your perspective is on purchasing in cities like Los Angeles or New York, where the barrier to entry is so much higher and it does come with inherent challenges. As a broker here in LA, this is something I face with my clients at Lady of Record every single day. And it can be so tempting to go into a market that's more affordable or somewhere like that, but maybe you don't know anything about that market. And that can also come with its own set of risks. And so, how, when you're looking at different locations and where to invest, where to develop and build, how do you evaluate different locations? And again, what's kind of your take on knowing when it's worth stretching in the ones that are more challenging, like LA or New York?
So I think one thing that makes those more challenging markets, be that a New York, a Los Angeles, or my home market, Boston, is that there also are, as challenging as it is, that creates a barrier to entry. And remember that real estate there's a scarcity to it. And so if you have strong conviction about a location, a neighborhood, a place that you know well, there's a scarcity to the land that's there and to how much of the built environment can be in that location. And so I do think that investing where you know can be perhaps one of the best things you can do because you are going to know some of those idiosyncrasies of a certain block or of a certain street. And I imagine all the times we've gone up and down a set of blocks, right, or a street, and we know this one's particularly attractive because the sun hits a certain way at a certain time of day that just makes it feel magical in your space. Well, that has value, and knowing that and knowing those little small, components of it, I think are a huge part of creating a portfolio of investments. So when you're trying to build come into the industry and build a investment portfolio in the real estate space, I think it's important to listen to those instincts you have, and those instincts are often driven by the places you know. That happens on the small scale. It can happen on a large scale too. Our investment committee this weekend was evaluating a project that's located within blocks from where one of our investment committee members grew up. And I think that perspective that she shared in terms of understanding those blocks and how one block differs from the next and what it would be like to live there is actually a huge part of us making an investment decision about other people wanting to live there. So listen to those instincts and listen to your gut feelings on those small differences in place. And if you're investing in somewhere that's new, go there, be there in person. Real estate is one of those investment classes that you really do have to touch. It's a tangible asset, and it's important to touch those tangible elements of it. In COVID, I think we're reluctant sometimes to get on planes and go to sites, and we tried to do things from afar. And I've been reminded time and time again as I've gotten back on more planes and gone to more sites, how crucially important it is to see and feel the real estate if you're going to invest in it. So I really can't stress that the importance enough. There's only so much any of us can see, whether we're looking at small decisions like, and we're doom scrolling on Trulia or Zillow, which I do all the time, and always think about kind of my own personal real estate portfolio. But you have to get there in person to really understand it.
Not many jobs or investment types force you to get out in person in that way. Buying a stock or something like that can sometimes be limited to what's behind your screen. Whereas I think going back to where we started this podcast, having your legacy, your impact on a physical, tangible product that is part of the fabric of a city, I think is something that makes real estate, again, whether you're doing this at an institutional level, building 700 units in Manhattan, or as personal as, a home on the block that you grew up on and turning that into something. I think that in-person element is so crucial, but also so enjoyable and can really be engaging when you're looking to create impact with your financial decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story, your experience, your ideas. This conversation has been eye opening to the possibilities of, again, aligning economic opportunity with social impact. And I really appreciate you sharing your personal passion behind the two and really showing how that can happen. And I think what you've shared here today are real actionable tools that anyone listening can really start applying this mindset and strategy to their decisions. To close, I like to end each conversation with the same question, which is, what is your vision for the future of women's financial security?
I hope that women feel excited about learning new things that can enhance their financial security. I think that the idea of knowledge is power and that learning things can make us feel that much more ready to confront the next challenge or to be prepared for the unknown is a critical element. And so when I speak with my daughter about financial security all the time, I encourage her, the world's constantly evolving, the world is constantly changing. Let's not be fearful about that. Use let's learn as much as we can and try to make smart, informed decisions. And that sometimes means taking risks, but you can take those risks in an informed way as opposed to it feeling like a scary way. And so really using knowledge from your network, knowledge from others to help support strong decision making, I think is crucial as we all think about the opportunities for women to have financial empowerment.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.